May I come in, sir?
Come in. Shruti,
Sir.
so can you please introduce yourself?
Sir, my name is Chauhan Shruti Santosh. I belong to Nashik district of Maharashtra. I have pursued my graduation in sociology from Savitribai Phule Pune University, and this is my first attempt at this exam.
What prompted you about choosing sociology as your major?
Sir, in the first year of my college, I went through 4 subjects which I had them in general, and after studying them, I found more fascination towards Indian society as such to study, and then I chose sociology.
But can you elaborate upon that fascination? So what fascinated you? What part, what aspect, what feature of Indian society did fascinate you?
Sir, the very society in which I live, I thought studying it would be more interesting for me. Some parts which I like the most in sociology are the study of religion, the study of gender, and caste system as such.
Okay. Okay. So you mentioned 3 elements.
So.
Okay. So one is gender, the other is the religion, the third is the caste.
So.
Okay. Now you as part of sociology, and I think sociology also happens to be your optional for the civil services examination. So as part of that, you must have studied certain Western sociologists.
So.
Now, of the Western sociologists, which according to you is very relevant when it comes to understanding Indian society?
Sir, I would like to classify here. So when it comes to study of religion, I think Emil Durkheim is more relevant when I see the collective effervescence in the Indian society and the study of religion. When it comes to the study of, say, gender, I find feminist perspective to be more appealing because the very patriarchal nature of our society, as it is studied by feminists, is more appealing. And when it comes to caste system, I think the Western notion is little biased. So I cannot really think of a particular.
Any of the Western sociologists who is very important when it comes to understanding caste in India?
So Western sociologist, I think Louis Dumont is the one.
Okay.
But still, I find him little biased when it comes to Indian society.
Now, why biased? In what sense biased?
Sir, he thinks that the society in the West is homo equalis and the society in India is homo hierarchicus. So, hierarchy as such, he thinks is a very characteristic of Indian society, which he thinks is not the case in the West. So I think that is why.
You must have read about Marx, no doubt about.
So.
Okay. Can we apply Marx class model in order to understand present Indian society?
Sir, to some extent we do find that Marx has relevance because say cases of suicides in employees in say industries or establishments is one of the features of Marx, that is alienation. The increasing inequalities are also prevalent in Indian society. So here also Marx finds ground. But his very idea of class-based revolution seems a distant possibility to me.
What is so difficult, or why it has been so difficult to mobilize people on the basis of class in India?
Sir, in India, I feel more than economic, social aspects are important, such as caste.
Okay.
So, in recent times, we have seen that in Kerala, the case of IS officers having the groups based on religions. So, such ascriptive phenomena seem more prevalent in India than class as such.
Weber, Max Weber, you must have read about Max Weber. Did Max Weber study Indian society?
Sir, his study of religion had comparative studies of various religions. So, he did study.
Did he see something about or reflect on caste in Indian society?
Sorry, sir, I'm not able to recall.
Not able to recollect. Okay. But by the way, Weber is known for analyzing the phenomena of power. He saw three forms of power.
Sir.
You can even say three forms of authority.
Yes,
Have you
sir.
read about that?
Yes, sir, I have read.
Yes.
So the three types of authorities which Weber has pointed out are the traditional authority, the charismatic authority, and the legal rational authority.
Okay.
So when it comes to India, we do see that the legal rational authority is quite similar to the bureaucratic structure we see in India.
Okay. See, Weber cited out bureaucracy as the example of legal rational authority.
So.
Okay. So, did Weber entail only public bureaucracy?
So I do not think so.
Okay. So it comprised of even the private bureaucracy,
So.
part of the private organization. You are a student of sociology.
So.
In 91, we adopted new economic policy, which is also known as the policy of liberalization, privatization, and globalization.
So.
Now, that policy influenced every domain of Indian society.
So.
Now, of different domains, you as student of sociology, which domain is prominent as far as the influence of LPG is concerned?
So may I take few seconds? Sir, I can see the class structure getting more structured form after the LPG reforms. So I can apply Weber's model here. So wherein he saw that the white-collared class getting widened. So the middle class became prominent in Indian society post that.
Now, in what way that has influenced caste in India?
Sir, I can think of the dominant caste phenomenon here. So the traditional castes which had the authority back then started losing their importance to some extent, and the dominant castes became powerful in the sense that they found their ground in government service or the other establishments which were coming up, and apart from land ownership, government job or high package in private sector per se became indicators for castes to become dominant.
Okay. You come from the state of Maharashtra,
So.
and I think it is known for also the phenomena you refer to. It is the dominant caste.
So.
Okay. I think it is caste Maratha.
So.
But in recent years, if you look at the picture, the caste Maratha, community Maratha no more enjoys the earlier kind of dominance.
So.
If I say so, would that be appropriate assessment?
Sir, to some extent it is true, wherein we are seeing that the share of Marathas in government sector, or for that matter even in politics, is decreasing. The land ownership phenomenon, which was earlier the bastion of Marathas, is losing its ground to some extent. So by that logic, we can see it through even the protests which are demanding for the reservation. But there is another side to this picture also. Even today, the cooperative sector is largely dominated by Marathas. Secondly, even though there is fragmentation of land holdings, the percentage of lands owned by Marathas is way more than any other caste. So I think it is a sort of dialectical thing.
Okay. So which cannot be completely denied,
So.
nor can be accepted as a brutality. Is that so? Somewhere in the middle.
Yes, sir.
Okay. See, you refer to reservation, that is the demand of reservation by Marathas.
So.
And for that matter, in number of states, we have a history. Dominant caste from different states demanding reservation.
So.
In peculiar form. Now, there is no doubt that the economic distress has been the factor.
So.
Nobody denies that. But do you think, as a student of sociology, there is something more to it? economic distress is absolutely there.
So,
But is there something more
uh,
which is making them to come up with that kind of demand?
yes, I can think of Rajni Kothari as a sociologist who found that politicization of caste and casteization of politics are the two factors which I can sense in the demand for reservation. So politics is there in play apart from the economic crisis.
How would you justify more representation to women in civil services?
So firstly, when we have more women at workplace, we can get the gender just inputs for policy formulation. Secondly, even in terms of policy implementation, we can see a female officer when she can understand the problems of women in a more human form, she can implement it in a better manner. So I have an example to quote from my district itself. The ZP CEO Ashima Mittal ma'am, she came across this problem of malnutrition, especially in the tribal women in Nashik. So with the help of IIT Bombay, software was designed for the indicators of malnutrition, and accordingly, under the Poshan Abhiyan, some new ingredients are offered to them, and on their mobile phones they have that application which shows them relevant content and relevant videos, as in what should they be doing. So, and apart from that, when I think more women are there at workplace, the places become more safer for other women.
Do you know about Naxalism?
So,
In Maharashtra, actually, are there any presence of Naxalism?
yes, sir, there is.
Okay, in which belt of Maharashtra?
Sir, in the easternmost belt, wherein the Gadchiroli district is infamous for Naxalism.
Okay, why in that belt only?
Sir, when we see the border areas, it neighbors Chhattisgarh and Telangana at the southern end. So that area has deep forests, so it becomes vulnerable for such elements to grow there. And apart from that, the lack of development is also an important factor that they gain ground against the state. And
lack of development is there in the Marathwada also. Okay,
So-
it's a part of the Konkan also. So it is only in that particular belt. It goes to Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, it's a part of Bihar. Okay. So only underdevelopment is the reason.
No, sir. When we see Marathwada and Konkan as a region, agriculture is gaining ground there. But in Gadchiroli, the forestry across there is not, the lands have not become that cultivable. And apart from that, the government benefits are not reaching to
Development is the reason or development is the solution to eradicate Naxalism?
The lack of development is the reason, and grassroots development will be the solution.
Do you know actually history of this tribal revolution? Since when actually they are doing revolutions against the government, against the authority?
Sir, I think it began in the pre-independence era itself, wherein the people who were not tribals were considered as Dikus, and when they entered the tribal domains, they were treated as foreigners and aliens. Same continued after independence also, and there are belts across
What are the
India.
major reasons that they revolted against the government?
Sir, firstly, I think that they still consider the government as alien to them, who does not.
Why they were considering government as their alien in the pre-independence era? You can think even before 1900,
So,
there were some tribal revolts.
sir, the methods practiced by tribals were different from the mainstream, as we can say it. So, in Jharkhand, I think it was the revolt between hoe and the plow. So, the agriculture, which was prominent business back then, and it still is today. So, the cultivation, as I said earlier, was different practiced by mainstream, and in case of tribals it was shifting cultivation. Their ownership of forests was a very emotional issue for them. So post independence we sort of.
Recently, actually, Gadchiroli was in news regarding Naxalism in Maharashtra. So major actually step was taken by the government of Maharashtra. So what was that? You know about it?
Sorry, sir, I
never
might.
Happened means before that. For the first time, government did it.
Sorry, sir, I missed that probably.
Okay. What is the situation of Naxalism in India? It is increasing or decreasing up to what extent? And what is the probability that it will wipe out? Or what is the government target?
Sir, as per the Home Ministry data cited in the Parliament, Naxalism has quite significantly decreased, and even the deaths arising out of it have decreased. So I can think of a better future wherein we will probably have eradicated Naxalism.
Okay, what is their objective?
So their objective, as it began back then, was the ownership of land. The ones who cultivated should be given the ownership of lands, but post some decades, the objectives have quite become different from that time, and they want government actually to pay heed to all their demands, which include their rule in their territories. And
okay, suppose government actually fulfill their demand.
So
Okay, then there will be no Naxalism. So what is their major demand? Development.
yes, sir, that is what I can think of.
Okay. Shruti, actually, recently there was a lot of controversy about the EVMs.
So,
right. So why actually we shall not go for the ballot paper again if there is less trust of people, less trust of some political parties? So what's wrong with it? So what is your take on it?
So firstly, I think the very population of our country is a big deterrent for going back to ballot papers. It will be a humongous exercise for the election commission. Secondly, there are many controversial votes in the ballot papers, as in the exact vote given to whom is not detected correctly. And thirdly, sir, the resource issue will also arise, as in paper requires cutting of lot of trees, so that can also be a factor.
Considering the India's size, considering the amount of paper we use, so that will be very less. That's not a significant issue that we use papers. Why actually US is taking election on ballot paper, not on cash machines? That is far advanced than India.
Sorry, sir, I do not know about the exact reasons, but what I can think of is the lack of trust in the machine may be the reason behind not going for EVMs.
Okay, so they are also not trusting. So why we are trusting a country like India, where people are completely not literate or not even digitally literate, and many things are hacked?
Sir, as far as I have read, I think EVM is EVM is not prone for manipulation of any kind as far as the technology is developed. And the main reason for not going back to ballot papers is the exercise will be too hectic for the commission, seeing the government employees engaged in it, and the logistical issues will be very high. So that is what I can think.
Okay. So do you know about the development administration and regulatory administration, separation of district collector's work and ZPCO work?
So,
do you know about it?
So I have a vague idea about it.
Okay. So what is the difference? Responsibilities of district collector and responsibilities of ZPCO.
Sir, the ZPCO largely looks behind the Panchayat Raj institutions, the Jilha Parishad, Panchayat Samitis and the Gram Panchayats. And when it comes to district collector, it is about the entire district, not only about the PRIs. It also includes the urban parts of the district.
Okay, so when we talk about the subject, let's suppose education. So education is with whom? District collector or ZPCO?
Sir, with the ZPCO, the Jilha Parishad schools are under her administration, and the overall education I can think of might be under district
Is it
Karnataka.
same in all states of our country, or that structure is different in different states?
Sir, I think it is different in different states.
Different in different states.
So-
Means in what sort?
Sir, the Jilla Parishad schools as we see them in Maharashtra are...
No, talking about the position of district magistrate and DPCO, not about education.
Yes, sir. So in southern India, the CEO of Jilla Parishad has relatively more power and
And the district collector.
than their counterparts in northern India. So I think that will be a difference, that Panchayat Raj institutions are quite strong in the southern part. So it will be having more power than their northern counterparts.
Okay, and is there a tax structure? Is there everywhere in India? Or at some states there is strict 2 tier, and in some states still there is a 4 tier? About the Panchayat Raj should I say?
So as far as I am able to recollect, many of the states have 3 tiers, but there is a permission for based on population for some states to work on the 2 tiers only.
Okay, means just Panchayat Samiti and the JDP, but no Gram Panchayat.
No, sir. I think the Panchayat Samitis are not there, and Jilla Parishads and Gram Panchayats.
Are you sure?
I'm
What is
not.
73rd Amendment Act?
Sorry, sir.
What is 73rd Amendment Act?
The 73rd Amendment Act established the 3-tier Gram Panchayats.
That is a
Panchayats.
constitutional amendment.
So,
Is it possible that despite being a constitutional amendment, there will be only 2 tiers in some states?
so as far as I'm able to recall, there is an exception given on the basis of population. So, I will have to read up on that.
Shruti, your father works for Jilla Parishad School, right?
So-
That's state government job he is doing.
So,
Why did he think of enrolling you in a government school? Did you ever talk to him regarding this?
yes, sir.
What is the reason?
So it was on the basis of the schools we have at my native place. So the school in which I learnt was a government-aided minority institution. That was perhaps the best school to enroll. So that was the
So does
only.
that mean government schools are not in Uchi?
In some areas they are, but largely I think the poor state of affairs continues in government schools.
What is that?
So firstly, the very ratio of teachers and students is not balanced. I have seen that in my father's school, they have 7 classes, but there are only 4 teachers. So one teacher almost looks after 2 classes. Secondly, the lack of infrastructure, wherein there are no separate toilets for girls. That can be second aspect. And thirdly, the overall hype around the English medium education is one of the factors.
So, what do you think? What kind of reforms are needed in order to make these schools work better?
So firstly, I think on the physical front, we can look after the infrastructure upgradation. Secondly, the training of teachers is quintessential. The English as a medium of English as a subject needs to be catered to carefully as parents demand it. And apart from that, I think the overall awareness in society with respect to government schools should be done, as the Delhi model has worked quite well. So we can have such model schools which will make parents enroll their kids in government schools.
So, you preferred IAS then IRS and yes, IT and custom, right? So, considering your preference, you seem to have a preference for working in revenue department, right? Yes. So, do you really think that Delhi model could be a model that we can really adopt nationwide, particularly considering the budget of Delhi metropolis and then other regions in India?
No, sir, the exact model won't be able to be replicated across India. But as far as the area is concerned, we can have the customization to that model based on the demands at that place. But I just cited it as an example.
Tell me one thing. Your school name is Neminath Jain.
So,
Who was Neminath?
Neminath Bhagwan was the 22nd Tirthankar of Jainism.
So, was he Bhagwan? In the sense, was it a concept of God?
No, sir. But as far as I have read about Jainism, the Tirthankars are given the title of Bhagwan as people admire them. Sir.
So, what Jainism preaches? The early Jainism, particularly, regarding the concept of God.
So, Jainism does not take a fixed stand with respect to God, as in it does not reject it, but it places the jinn, the Tirthankaras, above the God.
So, tell me one thing, how many Tirthankars are there according to tradition?
There are 24 Tirthankars.
Were they historical?
Sorry, sir, I'll have to read up on that.
Okay. So, what kind of contribution do you see on the part of Parshvanath and Vardhaman to Jainism?
Sir, as far as I can remember, till Parshvanath, there was not the element of brahmacharya in the 5 vows of Jainism. It became more stricter under Vardhaman Mahavir. So that is what I am able to recall.
You have mentioned that you want some award for chanting Bhagavad Gita.
So,
tell me one thing, is it a good idea to teach Bhagavad Gita in schools?
Sir, we can teach it as a part of philosophy or wisdom, irrespective of its religious origin.
Do you really think in school, students have that kind of academic where they can teach philosophy and all those things? Metaphysics for that matter.
Sir, I believe Bhagavad Gita as such is not a very complex thing. It just deals about the very worldly problems we face. So, if we can have its simpler versions as moral stories, it can help.
Okay, how do you see Bhagavad Gita in terms of historical and sociological perspective?
Sir, I'm not able to get the question exactly.
Bhagavad Gita,
So,
you said there is philosophy.
So,
You said there are solutions, reflections on good and problems.
So,
historically, how do you see it? Was it reflecting on the contemporary problems at that time, and what were those?
Sir, Bhagavad Gita does reflect upon the problems which were at that time, and it also deals with the very problems of this world. So, the very thought of the confusion between vanity and delusion, the choice between pleasure and pain was back then, and it's still prevalent. So, at such points, I think Bhagavad Gita is...
This is pretty much metaphysical than mundane. It is. When I said, looking at Bhagavad Gita from sociological perspective, do you see any kind of reflection of society, contemporary society, in terms of thought that has been presented in Bhagavad Gita?
Yes, I am able to think. So in Bhagavad Gita, it is mentioned that as our consciousness rises, we see the problems getting smaller. So, so is the case when we think of wisdom also. When we gain more wisdom, what appears to be...
That's spiritual talk that you are getting in.
So,
social conditions existing at the time when Bhagavad Gita was composed, is there any kind of reflection on those social conditions in Bhagavad Gita?
Yes, sir. So when Arjun poses his questions in front of Lord Krishna, he had this familial bonds and the cultural conditioning as a Kshatriya. So that were the problems faced by him, and that reflects...
What was the exact problem that he faced as Kshatriya?
As a Kshatriya, he was thinking that this war will be very much detrimental to overall the Kshatriya kin. So almost all the men will be lost in the war, and who will be looking after the kingdoms? Sir, the only answer I can recollect right now is that Lord Krishna said, when you stand by dharma, you should not think of the opposite party you are fighting.
What is dharma?
Sir, dharma, as is told by Lord Krishna, is the act which we do should be morally right. It should not inflict pain upon others, as in the larger context. So the ends should be important.
Did he really talk about pain?
Sorry, sir.
Did he really talk about pain?
Yes, sir, I think so.
So dharma in Bhagavad Gita is duty.
So,
Right. So what Arjun was doing was he was deviating from his duty. Being Kshatriya, he had to fight the war for the dharma.
so.
Right? So he refused to take up the arms, and that is where the whole Bhagavad Gita was being told to him. So, duty of Kshatriya was to fight for dharma.
So.
Right? What if Eklavya picks up weapons? And what is the stand of Bhagavad Gita on Eklavya picking up weapons?
Sorry, sir, I have not come across the details.
One last question. You talked about caste system when answering the first question. Is it hierarchical or not?
Yes, sir, it is.
It is hierarchical, right?
Sir.
So, I think the area in which you live is Mahatma Phule Nagar, right?
Sir.
Can you please discuss briefly what kind of view he had on caste system?
Yes, sir. Mahatma Phule was against the caste system. So he established the Satyashodhak Samaj and also promoted for the marriages which did not have the priest who will be making the marriage as solemn. So that is one thing. And secondly, he also promoted the Raja Bali as the Lord instead of, say, Lord Ram or Krishna. And he also opened the separate schools for Mahars and Mangs, which are the backward castes in Maharashtra. So,
Shruti,
sir.
the America is thinking about restructuring their H-1B visa policy. Are you aware of that?
Sir, I read about it, but I'm not exactly able to recall.
Do you know what is the type of visa H-1B? What type of visa is that?
Sir, it is for the employment in America. So the foreigners going for employment.
Okay, and will there be an implication of this on people who will abroad from India to America?
Yes, sir, it will have.
Okay, one more question, Shruti. The government of Uttar Pradesh is organizing Kumbh Mela.
Sir.
Right? And you also come from a place called as Nasik, which is also one of the place where such a Kumbh is held.
Sir.
So in that context, can you please let us know what are different types of Kumbh?
Yes, sir.
And why is that celebrated across India?
Sir, the story behind Kumbh is that during the process of Samudra Manthan, there was a fight between Devas and Danvas over the ownership of Amrit. And as there was a fight, the Amrit Kalash was in the hands of Vishnu, and it fell on some 4 places on the earth. And at those 4 places, the Kumbh is held. And when it comes to the types of Kumbh, it is the 12-yearly Kumbh Mela. The Ardha Kumbh Mela is held after every 6 years, but it takes place at the 2 places of Haridwar and Prayagraj only. And the Mahakumbh is a phenomenon which occurs after every 144 years, and it is invariably at Prayagraj.
Okay, so what type of Kumbh is going to happen in Prayagraj?
Sir, it is a regular 12-yearly Kumbh, but the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh has decided to call it as a Mahakumbh, as just 3 years ago the Ardha Kumbh was held. So,
okay, and what type of Kumbh is held in Nasik?
Sir, it is the 12-yearly Kumbh.
Right.
Sir.
Okay, but is that the only reason the Kumbh is held? That you mentioned earlier?
Sir, that is the
What
story.
are different types of activities which are conducted in such a Nasik?
Sir, the first is the Snan on the Amavasya, which is said as for the purpose of Prayashchit. So that is one of the important things to be done in the Kumbh. Second is the debates across the philosophies in Hinduism. So various akhadas do come and they engage in the debates. Along with that, the people who come there also visit the religious places, the temples which are around the site of Kumbh. So these are the things I'm
coming to the first thing which you mentioned about the Prayashchit. People are coming there and taking Devaguri rivers. Can you say that these much people are committing sins and they're coming there for Prayashchit? So large number of people are committing sins.
Sir, the very purpose of the Snan is, as it is told in the stories, is Prayashchit. But out of the collective effervescence felt at that place, the religious significance of it, and it getting recognition by the UNESCO also, people think it as a religious important festival sort of thing, so they do come.
Just one thing, Shruti. A scheme was quite in news from your state and still is in news. Okay. Which was designed, which was designed for women. So what scheme am I talking about?
Sir, is it the Ladki Bahin Yojana?
How do you look at the scheme as student of sociology?
Sir, from the feminist perspective, it is important for giving women a share which they can call it their own. So seeing the status of women in India, especially in terms of say health or education, they can use that share for at least their medical checkups or something like that. But when I look at the larger picture, I think there can be better alternatives to it. Say for instance, the road infrastructure in rural areas, or the plight of women for collecting the fuel wood. If it is reduced, then I think the Ladki Bahin, as it is called as the beloved sister, they will be more happy.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sirs.